The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room was tense on July 26, 2025. The air was thick with anticipation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I want to try to separate policy and politics for a second. I know it's hard to do around this place, but I thought Senator Cornyn made a very good point in his opening remarks. I think Senator Schmidt made the same point that the policy here is very important. And I want to ask you your opinion on the policy. Professor, tell me briefly, I know you came to talk about auto pens, but tell me briefly about the 25th Amendment.
Well, Senator, the 25th Amendment provides the process by which to implement a principle that's in the original Constitution, which is when the president's unable to exercise the powers and duties of the presidency, somebody else exercises them, starting with the vice president. The 25th Amendment sets up a process by which, if there's a question whether the president is able to do that, the vice president and the heads of the executive departments can temporarily basically put the vice president in as acting president, and then Congress ultimately decides the question.
Well, the standard, is it not, Professor? The standard is disability of the president. Is that correct?
Unable to exercise the powers and duties.
Okay.
Yes.
Here's what I would like your opinion on, and the opinion of these two gentlemen here. You have all been staff. You've worked in government. You've had a boss. In Mr. Spicer's case, his boss was the president of the United States. But let's suppose the president, you were using your experience as a staffer. You were working for the president, any president. Hypothetically a president. And let's suppose the president started talking like he was from outer space. Let's suppose the president became fatigued very easily. He couldn't finish a sentence without taking a nap. Let's suppose the president, he was just physically in bad shape, mentally and physically. Mentally, he may or may not have, you're not a doctor, neurodegenerative disease, but physically you can see, you could bake a Thanksgiving turkey and the time it takes him to walk across the stage. What do you think, as a member of his staff, what do you think is your moral obligation to say, wait a minute, president can't do the job anymore? I know you're loyal folks. You believe in your president, this president, whichever president. I'm speaking hypothetically.
The 25th Amendment, ratified in 1967, was born from the chaos and uncertainty that followed the shocking assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The nation was left reeling, unsure of what would happen if a president could no longer serve, and the need for a clear plan became undeniable. The amendment established for the first time a detailed and unambiguous process for transferring presidential power if the president is incapacitated, disabled, or otherwise unable to fulfill the duties of the office. It was designed to prevent confusion and ensure continuity at the highest level of government. Section 4, the most dramatic and rarely invoked part of the amendment, is the focus of this hearing. It allows the vice president, together with a majority of the cabinet, to formally declare the president unfit to discharge the powers and duties of the office. By submitting a written declaration to Congress, the vice president immediately assumes the role of acting president, ensuring that the executive branch remains functional even in moments of crisis. The president, however, is not powerless. They can contest the declaration, setting off a high-stakes process. If the vice president and cabinet stand by their decision, Congress must resolve the dispute, requiring a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate to remove the president. This exceptionally high threshold is meant to ensure that the process cannot be used for mere political gain or personal vendettas. It's a safeguard against abuse, demanding broad consensus before such a drastic step is taken. Yet, while the amendment is clear in its legal language, the reality is far more complicated. Human judgment, personal loyalties, and intense political pressure are always in play, making the process unpredictable and fraught with tension. Picture the vice president and cabinet meeting behind closed doors, wrestling with the gravity of their decision. They must weigh not only the president's condition, but also the potential consequences for the nation and the world. Their choice could stabilize the country in a moment of peril, or, if mishandled, plunge it into deeper crisis and division. The stakes could not be higher. That's why Section 4 has been used so rarely in American history. Its power is immense, but so are the risks and responsibilities that come with it. The hearings debate was not just about legal procedures, it was about the very stability and resilience of American government, and the delicate balance between law, leadership, and democracy.
You're loyal, you want to be a good staffer, but you also have a moral obligation. How do you reach that decision, Professor? And I'll go to each of you.
Senator, I think the first thing you would have to to do in a situation like that is exercise your own judgment. How serious is this problem? Because everybody has moments when they lose focus. It happens. But if somebody thinks this is a really serious problem, I think the first thing to do is the most difficult, which is to say to the president, because the 25th Amendment also provides that the president can say, I'm unable to exercise the powers and duties of my office.
And suppose the president
That would be extremely
says,
difficult, but I think it should be
look,
done.
trust me, I can't. And it's clear to you that he has neurodegenerative disease and he can't. What do? Do you have a moral obligation as a staff member to go to the American people and say, we've got a problem here, it may cost me my career?
Senator, I think at that point you have an obligation to talk to the vice president, who is in charge of the Section 4 process under the 25th Amendment.
What about you, Mr. Wold? You have a moral obligation. I understand you want it to go away, you want to work it out with him, but you can't. When does a staffer have a moral obligation to stand up and say he can't be president anymore, she can't be?
Well, Senator, the 25th Amendment only works if individual staffers or officers of the United States exercise that kind of moral judgment.
That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think always, as the professor said, I mean, the presidency is an enormous burden, so it would be not one instance, it would have to be several instances of a failure to exercise judgment.
How do you make that decision? You're the staffer. I get it.
Yeah, well, I think it begins with prayer, of course, but after that, I think it's conversation with other staffers, and if you're unable to confront the president or to raise the issue with the vice president, you should resign.
Senator Kennedy turned, his expression serious, as he sought guidance from Una Harrison, a respected constitutional scholar. He asked Harrison for clarity on the complexities of the 25th Amendment, hoping to cut through the confusion and political noise. Harrison explained, invoking the 25th is not a simple medical diagnosis, but rather a profound judgment call that weighs heavily on those involved. The amendment's language, unable to discharge the powers and duties, is intentionally broad, leaving room for interpretation and debate. Incapacity could be physical, such as a stroke or injury, or mental, like cognitive decline. The decision is ultimately political, not just medical, and requires careful deliberation. The process is subjective, relying on the character, integrity, and courage of those in the room to make a decision that could alter the course of history. Harrison noted the amendment was designed to prevent secret rule, referencing the time when Woodrow Wilson's wife, Edith Wilson, effectively ran the government after his stroke, shielding the president's true condition from the public. But in today's hyper-partisan climate, any move to invoke the amendment would likely be seen as a coup or power grab by the president's supporters, fueling division and distrust. The burden of proof is immense. The risk of political upheaval is high. Every action is scrutinized by the media and the public, adding pressure to an already fraught process. Ultimately, the amendment tests not only the legal framework, but also the patriotism, wisdom, and judgment of the president's closest advisors, who must put country above politics in a moment of national crisis. Sean Spicer, former press secretary, offered the insider's view. He argued staffers have a moral obligation to act if the president is clearly unfit. Loyalty to the country must outweigh loyalty to the individual. In the White House, junior aides may be ignored, so the burden falls on senior staff. If a pattern of cognitive decline emerges, it's their duty to document and present it to the vice president. Ignoring such evidence would be a dereliction of duty. The personal cost is high. Careers and relationships would be destroyed.
What about you, Spicer? Do you stand up and do it and tell the truth and run, or do you have a greater obligation to your boss?
Well, luckily, I didn't have that problem. But I would say that you have a moral obligation as an American, as a citizen, as a human being. If the leader of the free world cannot conduct themselves to make the decisions that are critical to this country and to the world, you absolutely have a moral obligation to follow the chain of command. And if they don't act, then you must.
Do either of you gentlemen disagree with that, Professor?
Senator, I think acting means talking to the people who have the responsibility or in a position under the Constitution to do something.
You don't
about the
agree with
situation.
Mr. Spicer?
Senator, I'm not sure exactly what he has in mind, other than talking to the people who can make the decision.
I'm just trying to ask. You've all been staffers. Suppose you go to everybody you're supposed to go to, and they all say, "My advice to you is to shut up." Do you have a moral obligation as a staffer to say, "Look, person can't be president of the United States. It isn't policy. He physically can't do it."
Senator Kennedy, it's not a question of whether a staffer has that obligation. It's whether you as an American have that obligation, and I think each and every one of us does.
Yeah, but you can see it. An American can't. Professor, what do you think?
Senator, I think there are situations under which someone in that position should speak publicly, but I also think that the views of a single individual who is not the person who is constitutionally responsible for taking measures should be considered by the public as just the views of of one individual who has some information about the subject.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But the oath is to the Constitution, not the person. Protecting the presidency sometimes means acting against the president. It's a heavy burden, but a necessary one. Jeffrey Wold, with extensive DOJ experience, stressed process and evidence. He cautioned, embarrassing mistakes don't meet the constitutional standard for incapacity. Section 4 is reserved for clear, sustained inability to perform the job. A strong, well-documented case is needed. First-hand accounts, patterns of behavior, and ideally medical input. The Attorney General would ensure the process is strictly legal, guarding against any political abuse. The decision rests with the Vice President and Cabinet, based on fact, not polls or rumors. The bar is intentionally high. The process is a last resort. Wold's message: this is a grave, deliberate step not to be taken lightly. The hearing returned to a central conflict: personal loyalty versus constitutional duty. In the White House, loyalty is everything. Staffers are chosen by and tied to the president. This creates a protective bubble, sometimes hiding serious problems. Breaking loyalty means risking your career, reputation, and relationship. The instinct is to stay silent or rationalize, hoping the issue resolves itself. But the 25th Amendment demands supreme courage, sacrificing personal interest for the country. The system only works if people are willing to make that sacrifice. The amendment provides the mechanism, but not the courage. That must come from the character of those in power. The hearing revealed the 25th Amendment is as political as it is constitutional. Invoking it would detonate a political bomb, dividing the nation and destabilizing government. The Vice President and Cabinet would only act if incapacity was undeniable and the risk of inaction outweighed the political fallout. The bar is high. A president could be impaired yet protected if public duties are performed plausibly. Senator Kennedy closed. The ultimate safeguard is the character of those sworn to uphold the Constitution. The amendment only works if leaders put country before party and truth before loyalty. It's a test of the entire system, staff, cabinet, and the American people. The stability of the republic depends on their wisdom and courage.